The Secrets of Doctor Who is brought to you by the Star Quest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give. You're listening to The Secrets of Doctor Who, episode 180.
One day, I shall come back.
That's it. I've been renewed.
Is when a Time Lord's body wears out, he regenerates.
I'm a Time Lord. I'm not a human being. I walk in eternity.
Braveheart.
Change, my dear, and it seems on a moment too soon.
Unlimited rice pudding.
Physician healers. Wearing a bit thin.
Fantastic.
I am Scottish. I can complain about things.
Ta-da! Ooh. Should be fine.
Hi, I'm Dom Bettinelli, and you're listening to The Secrets of Doctor Who, where we discuss everything about the hit BBC series, Doctor Who. And today we're discussing the 11th Doctor story, The Beast Below. Joining me today on the panel are Jimmy Akin. Hi, Jimmy.
Howdy, Dom, and welcome to the first of two beginning of a relationship time travel space whale episodes we're talking about today.
That's right. We'll be talking. We're also going to be recording an episode from Star Trek Discovery that also features a space whale, but you won't be hearing that one this week.
And time travel at the beginning of a relationship.
It's very weird how these things coincided, but yes, it's very interesting. And also Father Cory Sticha. Hi, Father Cory.
How's it going?
Very good, thanks. So, folks, please be sure to subscribe to the podcast in Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher, TuneIn, Spotify, iHeartRadio, your favorite podcast app, or on the SQPN YouTube channel, where you should always hit the bell to get notifications. Before we get into today's episode, there's a little bit of Doctor Who news. I almost said Star Trek. Doctor Who news that came up, which is an article that was in the Radio Times, Jimmy, where Stephen Moffat, and you brought this to our attention, Stephen Moffat reveals that there's a secret future Doctor hidden in one of his old episodes.
Yeah.
What is that about?
Well, so people will remember Silence in the Library and Forest of the Dead, which is the first River Song story where River dies, and it also has the Vashta Nerada, the shadows that eat you. It's the, hey, who turned out the lights one. And
right.
Threaded throughout those two episodes, we get these images or scenes of a little girl who seems to be watching the story unfolding on television from a much more pleasant reality. And her father is there, as is her apparent therapist, who's a guy named Dr. Moon. And then later, Donna gets taken into the little girl's world, virtual world, and she meets Dr. Moon, who kind of escorts her around. And he's a very kind guy. And then at the end, after River dies, she gets taken into the world and meets Dr. Moon. And in the story, Dr. Moon is explicitly explained as a moon that orbits the planet Library, which is also like the virus checker for the database. And so he cares for everything going on in this virtual world. And so he's kind of a doctor as a virus checker. But in an online dialogue between Russell T. Davies and Stephen Moffat, and this pair of episodes came out in Russell T. Davies' time, Russell T. Davies reminded Stephen Moffat of the fact that he had planned for Dr. Moon to be a data ghost of the Doctor.
Right.
And so the idea was Dr. Moon, the image of Dr. Moon and the personality of Dr. Moon is a future incarnation of the Doctor, maybe like the 45th incarnation, and the Doctor's final incarnation. And he died in River Song's arms and on some battlefield, and she saved a data ghost of him and put him into the virtual world in the moon of the Library. And so what we actually have here is everything coming full circle, where now River Song's data ghost gets reunited with the data ghost of the Doctor. And this was not a fan theory. This was planned by the showrunner and the writer of the episode.
Right.
And so it is unspoken canon, if you want to put it that way. And this is technically, therefore, a 2-Doctor episode because we have David Tennant's 10th Doctor, and I forget the name of the actor, but Dr. Moon as the, final Doctor. And so I thought that was cool. It's another, we've had other characters like this that people have said, oh, this guy has to be the Doctor. He has to be some future incarnation. We had that with Gaurani back in the 7th Doctor's time in Delta and the Bannermen, where this character is so Doctor-like. People said, oh, Gaurani has to be the Doctor. We also had
the beekeeper.
The beekeeper. We also had the curator, who's played by Tom Baker, is obviously a future incarnation of the Doctor. And then we recently had Jo Martin as the Ruth Doctor. Even though she's a past Doctor, she's like another one-off, just passing by Doctor.
Right. Yeah, the actor, by the way, is Colin Salmon, who's a great British actor and does a bunch of things. I remember watching that at the time, and when we discussed this, I maybe brought it up, how when I first saw that, I thought it was weird that we had a character named Dr. Moon in an episode of Doctor Who which could be confusing, or I was confused that they didn't relate it somehow. So this is obviously how they were relating it internally to the Doctor.
Yeah.
Very interesting. Tangentially, speaking of this conversation, as we record this, there's a YouTube channel called Doctor Who Lockdown. It's an official Doctor Who YouTube channel, and they're producing new content related to Doctor Who, and there's some really good ones being written and created by, Stephen Moffat, for instance, and the one with Rory recording a video diary for his child back in the 1940s was awesome. That was the best.
Oh, it was really good. Rory is describing using the last working cell phone in the world.
the first working cell phone in the world.
The only working cell phone in the world to record a video diary describing his life for his newborn child that Amy has just given birth to. And we at the end we hear Amy yelling off screen, "Are you going to come in here and help me paint the baby's bedroom or not?" And it was all written by Neil Gaiman. Actually, I think may have written this one.
It might have been
Russell T Davies. No, it
was either Gaiman or Moffat.
Right. So and it was played by the actor who plays Rory and
Arthur Darvill.
Yes. So just they were like, and there's several of them like that. There's one that's a follow up to The Girl in the Fireplace, and several things like that. So some are live action filmed. Obviously, the actors at home. Others are animated. So it's very clever and very. I appreciate very much the effort they're going to create Doctors.
Well, there's also some written material coming out because Russell T Davies recently released kind of what was his prelim idea of what happened to the Doctor right after the Time War, but right before the episode Rose. So like of the moment, of course, the moment wasn't the Rose Tyler lookalike interface, but it was actually, the box and everything and kind of describing all that. And that was kind of interesting to read too, because he wrote it as if it was like the last couple of pages of a novel. So it kind of starts like in a half paragraph. And
okay.
Everything.
Do you know where that is? That's online somewhere?
I think it's on the Doctor Who website. I think they've got an official Doctor Who website. Link. But so there's a lot of this kind of material that's coming out that because obviously they can't produce new shows right now. They're able to use that to do something with, to put more material out there, anyways.
So I'm just writing down Russell T Davies moment story. So I just made a note for myself to find that link and put it in the show notes. All right. Anything else left to say about this?
Let's get to space whales.
Yes, let's talk about the Captain. There be whales here. Oh my gosh, we've got the crossing the streams again. So the Beast Below. This is our first adventure with Amy post the regeneration episode. We've transitioned now from the 10th Doctor to the 11th Doctor. We're now in regular episodes. So Amy, like Martha, is off on a new adventure, a one-off. He says at the beginning, this is we're doing a one-time adventure with you. I'm taking you on a trip, and it becomes a really 3 parts, 3 episodes that run right into each other, just like again with Martha. So it's a very interesting pattern that they're following, and so it starts in the TARDIS. Jimmy.
Well, I thought I'd mention that for me, one of the significant parallels here is to the episode The End of the World, which is Rose Tyler's first adventure with the Doctor outside of her home environment. So they both meet the Doctor in 21st century Earth, and then they go somewhere in the distant future. And there are a lot of parallels between this and what happens to Amy. And I find it interesting to contrast this with The End of the World, because they both get taken to a future that's exotic but also dark. But I think there's more like eye candy in The End of the World, with all the weird aliens and, the tree aliens, and I give you the gift of carbon dioxide from my lungs and things. And Cassandra, the last remaining human who's stretched thin as a trampoline.
Right.
And there's more eye candy there, but here there's more horror.
Mm-hmm.
And The End of the World has it's all driven by, we are at this dramatic moment in history, namely when the sun expands, but everything else is kind of incidental. Whereas here we have what's going to be a very interesting political, philosophical puzzle about the good of the community and democracy and things like that. So you have less eye candy and more plot with more of a philosophical core to it, rather than just a moment of wonder, and also more horror. Also, this episode reminded me of the Seventh Doctor's Paradise Towers, which we've talked about, where you have this future arcology. It's a building where everyone lives. It's all self-contained. Everything happens in this building, and it's like run down. And we have kind of the same thing here with Starship UK. Everything happens in this living environment, in this essentially building in space, and it's also run down and dystopian.
Right. Yes, it's Space Britain in the 29th century.
Oh, actually, it's like the 33rd century. They left in the 29th.
Oh, okay.
There's the idea that the Earth was ravaged by solar flares, was destroyed, which something actually goes back to Tom Baker time. This is the first time that Stephen Moffat is flexing his I'm going to pull back all the classic Who stuff muscles.
Yeah,
and because that goes back to we did was it Ark in Space,
and the couple of episodes that follow on from that. Yeah,
that's what that is. Okay, so everybody has picked up and left. They've apparently picked up the cities, or they just made they made it look like the spaceship looked like buildings or something. It's
funny because they're different buildings, and each building was like a classic city. So you see like Devon and all these
Yorkshire,
Yorkshire and all these other, and the Lancashire somewhere down in the bowels.
Some of those being regions rather than cities, but yes,
region, right. But it's interesting the way they did that, where they kind of grouped them out, and we know that the Scots went their own way.
Yes,
they wanted their own ship.
As Amy says, they have their own ship.
Yes, and Amy is very pleased by that. So we start with the teaser is these school kids sitting in a classroom getting grades from this, what looks like the classic carnival fortune teller machine.
Yeah,
like you saw in the movie Big, which is maybe if you're too young enough you don't know what that is, but go watch the movie. So, but it's sort of this robotic,
or go to a carnival.
Yeah. So its head turns from happy to mad, as the kids, the good kids get the happy face, and then the head on top of this fortune teller type thing turns and has a mad face when Timmy gets a 0, and he's not allowed to ride the lift or he'll get sent below because he got such a bad grade, which is a throwback to a lot of these more, actually throwback. It's precursor to some of these things we've seen, like in Black Mirror, the Netflix series about the social score, and in reality in China right now, where people can get a social score, and when their social score is too low, they do not get access to certain public amenities. So it's very dystopian, and right here we're seeing an early version of this. So it's kind of funny to see how it predicts that.
I thought it was interesting that all of the school kids are very much in like 20th century school kid clothes. So there's like a retro vibe going on in this society. Also, I thought it was interesting that the lift, they don't call it a lift, they call it a Vader, which is clearly developed from the American term elevator. And to have that in a British setting in the future was interesting. I wonder how that resonated for people who are used to calling them lifts.
Right.
Also, they have advertising going on in the elevator or in the Vader when the boy gets in. And I thought I heard an ad for McClintock's Candy Burgers.
Yes.
Which sounds very interesting. Yeah. And then, of course, because he's not allowed in the lift, something horrible happens. The Smiler face goes, it had gone from happy to sad, and then it goes to rage. And so it gets its rage face on. And there's a creepy prophetic girl in a video doing a sinister children's nursery rhyme about the beast below. And he's falling, and then at the bottom of the shaft, the floor drops out, and there's this gaping red-black void beneath him, and he screams, and we're into credits. And I thought, what a great, effective, look at all the elements we have here, building up fear. We've got the sinister face, we have his personal failure, he's breaking the rules, we have elevator fall. That's terrifying for anybody. Elevator fall, creepy prophetic girl, floor drops out, hellscape below, scream. What a nice little cold open for us. It's very dramatic.
Yes. Father Cory?
Well, I was going back to the retro thing. This whole schoolroom was retro. They had retro, they had leather bags, they had the old wooden desks, they had chalkboards. This was not, 33rd century technology a la Star Trek. This was like early 20th century classroom that you had seen both in Britain and United States in many places.
Yep. I like the fact that the Vader, as you get to the Vader, it's modeled on the tube. So there's a mind the gap notice as they get on and all kinds of stuff like that. So it's interesting.
Well, there's lots of little throughout this. You can see lots of things that look like modern London, modern UK, where they're recognizable, like speed limit signs and all these other things that are different signs throughout the walls and everything. This could be a place somewhere in modern London, in theory.
Right. Yes, and probably was, or Wales. Anyway, so after the open, we come to the TARDIS, and the Doctor is holding Amy by her ankle as she floats outside the door of the TARDIS in her nightgown, and this is what we have is a direct continuation from the previous episode, and Amy, relates in an voiceover. Thank you. How last night was the night before her wedding, but the Doctor came back, and so off she went. And so she hasn't told the Doctor that she's supposed to get married the next day, but she has said, "I need to be back in the morning." So that's still hanging over our heads here as we begin this. And so there's this.
It's essentially a fantasy scene where he's holding her by the ankle and she's floating out in space, and her hair is billowing because he's extended the oxygen shield. And this is a fairy tale moment, and it's helping Stephen Moffat establish the fairy tale vibe for his era in Doctor Who. Right. That's an excellent point.
So they see Spaceship UK going by, and they decide to go for a look, and the Doctor warns her, right up front, this is the number one rule. We are observers only. That's the one rule I've always stuck to in all my travels. I never get involved in the affairs of other people or other planets.
Unless the kid's crying. Unless the kid's crying.
Yeah.
Yes,
or he's bored.
Unless the kid's crying.
I like how Amy tries to relate to that as she takes this on board cognitively. She says, "Oh, we're like a wildlife documentary. So even if we see a wounded little animal, we just have to let it die." And as she's saying that, she's watching Timmy's the kid who fell. His friend is a little girl, and we're watching her weep on the TARDIS monitor. And as Amy is articulating, we've got to let this little animal here die. Suddenly the Doctor appears and starts talking to the little girl.
Yeah. The little girl's Mandy, is as we find out. Yeah, so and it was funny, like Amy's doesn't realize that they've landed inside the Spaceship UK. She thinks they're still looking at it from a distance. And so then when she sees the Doctor on the screen, she's like, wait, how'd you get there? And she runs out to see him. There's an announcement when they show up. It says, "Welcome to London Market. You are being monitored," which is, it's a little in this day and age where closed circuit is everywhere. It feels a little like that.
Especially downtown London.
Yes.
Yeah.
The doctor is, meanwhile, seen by a man in a hood who has a key around his neck, who reports to someone that he's seen the doctor, and they need to tell a woman, what we are shown, who's sitting in a room full of water glasses on the floor.
Yeah, and there's a connection there. So the guys with the keys, initially we aren't told we aren't given a name for them. I referred to them in my notes as the Keymaster guys, but we're later told they're called the Winders.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Because they have the keys to wind up something. And also the fortune-telling machine things are called the Smilers, even though they don't smile all the time.
Yes.
And one of the things the doctor does as he gets out of the TARDIS, and this is only the second episode in airing, I don't know what order they filmed them, but it's the second episode for Matt Smith's Doctor. So he's still kind of a little unstable, and he's jumping around being crazy in London Market. And one of the things he does is take a glass of water away from someone and put it on the ground and watch it, and nothing happens. And he can't, when Amy asks him why he does this, he says, I don't know, I forgot. I think of a lot of things. It's kind of hard to keep track. And then, so that's significant when we see the woman from a rear angle shot. We only see her back, and she's got dozens of glasses of water sitting on the floor in front of her. So we know there's something really significant about these glasses of water. That's a connection between her and the doctor.
Right.
She even asks when she's told we've got a sighting, she says, did he do the thing? And apparently referring to the glass of water on the ground. So she seems to know who the doctor is. And it turns out there's a reason for that.
Yep.
So the doctor has some interesting observations concerning the little girl and the people around her. Like, it's a child. She's in distress, but she wants to cry, but she won't cry outwardly, which means that she's scared to cry. And then the adults who see her in distress aren't going to help her. So they probably know why she's in distress, but yet they're not doing anything about it. And that's why he thinks that this is a police state being monitored. Yeah. It was an interesting series of observations, like Sherlock Holmes sort of deductions. So he said the little girl runs off after he tries to talk to her. So he sends Amy to follow her and find out what's going on, while he goes and investigates this other thing having to do with the glass of water. So she finds Mandy, who actually noticed Amy following her. Amy, the woman in the nightgown was pretty noticeable. And they find a hole in the street under a sign for Magpie Electricals, which is a lot of fun. That's a throwback to Idiot's Lantern. And so Amy says, I'm going to go look at what's in this tent covering the hole, even though it's forbidden. And the girl's like, you're not supposed to do forbidden things. And while she's doing this, she starts ruminating about the fact that she was supposed to get married a long time ago tomorrow morning.
Yeah.
And then how pleased she was that Scotland has its own ship because she's Scottish.
Well, by the way, of course, Amy knows how to pick a lock, an old school padlock with just a bobby pin, little hair clip.
And once she gets in the tent, she finds a scorpion tail, essentially a giant, tail of something with a scorpion stinger on it.
Kind of like a tentacle, also.
Yeah, sort of a tentacle thing. It attacks her. She avoids it. She comes out, and now she's surrounded by the hooded men who shoot a gas in her face to make her pass out.
Very Batman 1960s version.
And it
from
comes
a ring.
off a ring. And these hooded men, they look almost monastic. I mean, if you've seen monks where they might have like a cross that hangs from their neck or something like that, and they're wearing hoods. That's really what they look like. Very
They
monastic.
do look like an order of something. Yeah.
What I was interested in was how she's ruminating about her marriage, because we only just learned about this. We only met her the previous episode, and we only learned about her marriage in the last shot of the previous episode, where we've just seen her run off with the doctor, and then the camera pans across her wedding dress.
Right.
And then she tells us, so that's like a dramatic stinger to go out on the previous episode on. And then we hear about this in the fairy tale sequence at the beginning of this episode, and now it's coming back, it's becoming more real. She's starting to realize the clash between the impulsive running away and I could have this whole other life that I wasn't planning on, and do I really want to get married now? And it's a crucial moment in Amy's character development that sets up the arc that she's going to have, both for the rest of the season, but in particular for the next few episodes.
Right. Did we know who her fiance was at this point?
No, because when we
don't.
met Rory in the previous episode, he's like, "Oh, who is this?" As "Oh, I'm her boyfriend," and as she's stumbling and saying "friend" at the same time.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah, this is when Rory was still kind of a secondary character. You know, they hadn't quite developed him to the point that he eventually becomes.
Yes, one of the most.
He eventually
beloved.
becomes in my mind, he becomes the primary companion as Amy becomes more like a second doctor, and Rory takes on the function of the everyman.
Yeah, that's true. That I'm looking forward to getting to those episodes. So the doctor is down in the bowels of the ship, looking around. He's putting his ear to the wall, and he's confronted by the woman who we saw earlier, who's now wearing a mask. And he basically tells her the whole reason for the water glasses was it tells him that the engines are off, or not even there, that there are no engines in the ship at all. And because the water would show the vibrations of the engines. And the woman in the robe says, she actually, as she departs from him, she calls herself Liz 10, and she says, "Help us, Doctor. You're our only hope." Anyone who's a science fiction fan knows where that comes from.
Yeah, that's not the only Star Wars parallel in this. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
I like how we have yet to get to the garbage masher scene.
Yes.
Yep.
I like how in a science fiction setting, Liz 10 is a perfectly acceptable name, like in Logan's Run, Logan 5 or Francis 6 is a totally normal science fiction name. So the significance of that does not initially register.
So meanwhile, Amy wakes up in a cubicle. It's a voting cubicle, and it identifies her, and by name. You are Amelia Pond, and says she's 1,306 years old.
I know. I love how, because this is Starship UK, so it needs to, for her to vote, it needs to verify she's a UK citizen, and she is. She's just from the 21st century. So Amelia Jessica Pond, we learn is her full name. She's 1,306 years old, which would put this at the end of the 34th century. And then she's waiting to see marital status, and she's waiting to see unknown.
Does she get married?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, holding us in suspense. I like there's a bit of an error, like a little on-screen error. The screen says she's 1,308, while the voice of the narration says 1,306. I just thought that was a little funny. When I saw that
women
the first time, I thought,
lie about their age.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, when I saw that the first time, I thought there was a clue, but no, it was just an error.
Well, I like her response too. She thought that she got a kick out of that. I'm 1,300 years old. This is pretty cool.
Yeah. So a video starts playing that says it will reveal the truth about the starship, and when we have done so, you will have a choice to press one of two buttons. You can either protest or forget. If 1% of the population of the ship votes to protest, just 1%, it will end everything with consequences for all. And so it doesn't tell us what that is. And then she apparently watches it. We get this flashing lights in her face. She watches it. She's horrified. She presses the forget button and then sees a message from herself pleading with her to get the doctor off the ship and not to let him investigate.
Yeah, the guy in the video only mentions the two buttons, but right between them there's a big third button that says record for no apparent reason. This is really kind of bad. They needed to come up with a better explanation for this, because why would you have a recording button in a voting booth? Especially a voting... I mean, you're not supposed to have anything monitored when you're voting.
Right.
And especially, why would you have it in a recording booth when its only apparent function is to send yourself a message after you've just forgotten? It seems kind of at cross purposes. But I like how they play it out dramatically, where Amy has hit the recording button or the forget button without even almost realizing it. It's like she's watching the video, and then all of a sudden she's hit the forget button. Her hand is on it. And she, from her viewpoint, it's like, how did that happen? And then the dramatic, scary, get out of here, find the doctor, do not let him investigate. You've got to get out of here now. This is for real message comes on. And that's really dramatic.
And the voting here, I mean, we'll get to the philosophical aspects of this as we come to the resolution, but the idea that voting to forget a horrible truth is really, I mean, there's a bit of a commentary on society today. Like this, we'd rather not deal with uncomfortable truths, so we prefer to forget them in various ways. And so that'll be interesting as we get to it. The girl tells us that when you become an adult at or voting age, you turn at 16. You can choose to view the video and vote every 5 years.
Yeah.
And everyone always chooses to forget.
Yeah.
Which is interesting.
It would be interesting. One thing I think I wish they would have done was had some kind of like, current votes to oppose, and say like what because they said it had to be 1% of the population. And it would have been interesting if there had been a counter somewhere to see how many had done that.
Well, it has to be 0 because remember, in just a minute we're going to see if you vote to protest, the floor opens up and you're dropped into the belly of the beast, literally.
Right.
Or the mouth of the beast.
Yes, it would always be 0 because no one survives a protest vote, I suppose.
So this is quite a close analog. I mean, this is one of the things that science fiction is classically, has a reputation for doing is social commentary, because it is an analog for what happens in the real world. Our governments do things that are dark, and they do it ostensibly in the name of protecting us. And that's what the guy in the video says. But we don't want to think about it. The guy in the video says that if you press forget, you'll be able to go on with your life unburdened by the knowledge of what has been done to save you. And that's a very close analog for, our governments do bad things on this dog-eat-dog geopolitical world stage. And we don't want to think about them. We don't want to know what's being done to save us because it's too unpleasant. But we still have a democracy. And so in some sense, we're responsible. And then he concludes with a very dramatic, may God have mercy on our souls.
This is analogous to the courtroom scene in A Few Good Men where Jack Nicholson does, you need me on that wall. You want me on that wall. And it's essentially a similar speech that he gives there. You don't want to know what I have to do in order to keep you safe in your beds at night while you're sleeping. We're on that wall doing these things. And it's essentially a politer British version of that. So is that when the doctor shows up, she doesn't tell him what she knows. And he manipulates the machine. He wants to find out what happens if you choose to protest. And in the course of that, he tells her that he's identified as not human. That's why the machine doesn't let him vote. And Amy's a little surprised by this. She doesn't realize he's not human. And she says, but you look human. And he says, no, humans look Time Lord. We came first, which I think is good. And then we have the whole, there are no more Time Lords left, and I never choose to forget that. And so for him, choosing to forget is fundamentally opposed to this most important decision he's made recently, at least in his recent incarnations, about not forgetting. Forgetting would be bad in that essence.
And then there's a line where, as he's just about to trigger the machine to find out its secrets, he says, hold tight, we're bringing down the government. And this is something to American ears has a much more dramatic sound than it would to British ears, because I was talking a number of years ago to a Canadian guy I knew, and he was saying, "Oh yeah, our government's about to fall," and to an American that sounds apocalyptic. I mean, that's like your nation is about to dissolve. There's going to be anarchy in the streets. What? Because for Americans, the government is not a particular administration. It's the whole governing structure that's there, regardless of which party is in power. But in British culture, a government is an administration. So you will have all of the bureaucrats keep their jobs, the Queen's still on the top, but the government or the administration changes. So it's not nearly as apocalyptic. So when the doctor says we're bringing down the government, he means we're about to change the administration.
So when they talk about the government, like right now in Canada, they'll talk about the Liberal government or the Justin Trudeau government.
Yeah.
Because that's the one that's in power now. If if that changes in a few years when they have their next election, of course they just had one, then it'll be somebody else's government,
right.
The Margaret Thatcher government back in the 80s in England and so on.
Right, and the government does have to fall or to be brought down in order to have a new election. Like they don't have regularly scheduled elections like we do. So the Doctor does hit the protest button. The door slams shut, and he and Amy are trapped inside. The Smiler becomes the Scowler. The floor opens up, and the Doctor says, "Say we," and Amy says, "Ah," which is not we. And they're dropped into a gross pit of food waste and such. It's really gross. And
shut down all the garbage mashers on the detention level.
Exactly.
I wasn't even thinking the garbage masher. I was thinking the big teeth.
Oh, that too. Yeah, the space worm.
Yes, the big teeth also from Empire. So he realizes that they're actually in the mouth of a beast, and he figures the only way to get out is to tickle the back of the throat of the creature with the sonic, and he gets it to vomit them out, which I thought was a pretty dangerous prospect, because outside the mouth is not the interior of the ship; it's space.
Yeah,
but apparently the it's a closed system, and they get put into an outflow tube, as they say.
I like how they play the scene because initially they're threatened by the swallow reflex.
Yes,
they're going to go down to the stomach if they don't do something.
Which the Doctor wants to see, just not in that circumstance.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so he triggers reverse peristalsis. They don't use the term on screen, but that's the reverse. I mean, peristalsis is the reflex that pushes stuff through our digestive system in the normal direction. Reverse peristalsis is what causes us to throw up. And so he triggers its reverse peristalsis. And we're in this dark, cavernous environment, and we see this wave coming at them. And as the wave is approaching, they're playing the theme of the 11th, the da-da-da, the standard, exciting, dramatic theme that's kind of dark and upbeat at the same time. And so we've got our main heroic theme playing as the wall of vomit is approaching them, and he yells, "Geronimo," his catchphrase. It's so wonderfully absurd.
And he says, "This isn't going to be big on dignity." Which, why would you face the wave? Turn away from it. Just turn away. Get it in the back, not in the face. Anyway, once they're in the outflow tube, there is a door. And R2's not on the other side, opening up all the doors on the detention level.
No, it's not R2. It's Liz 10.
Yes, but there is a button that they can press to open the door. But it's a forget button, so they have to again agree to forget in order to get out. So all bases have been covered here. And then they see the two of the Smilers at the other end of the tunnel.
For reasons.
Yeah, they can't come and do anything to us. And as soon as he says that, the machines open up and the Smilers stand. And apparently they're robots of some sort.
And this, I thought, was a missed opportunity because immediately Liz 10 shows up and shoots them.
Yes.
And it's like, you've just established these guys can physically move and menace people. We need to have some more of that. That needs to play out for a while before we get out of the danger.
Right. Although we do get a couple more that show up immediately next.
And they also show that they can self-repair, because as she shoots them and they're sitting there talking, all of a sudden they start moving, and she says, "Oh, they're repairing themselves. We got to get out of here."
Yes. And so when they get out, she begins to tell them how she grew up on stories of the Doctor passed down in her family, and she drops different clues, which reveals that she's Queen Elizabeth X. That's how she is Liz 10.
Yeah.
So a little bit of misdirection, because she's dark complected. She doesn't look like the Windsors. Let's put it that way. In that sense,
I had a little bit of trouble with Liz 10. Now on the rewatch of this episode, I had less trouble, but still there's some moments where a lot of what happens makes sense. I mean, she's a monarch who can't trust her government. That's why she's got the glasses of water on the ground. She knows their significance just like the Doctor does, and it's a daily reminder that she can't trust the people around her. Also, going out with the mask in public makes sense if you're a monarch and you don't want to be recognized. So it makes sense of a lot of stuff. But I had just a little bit of trouble with the idea of the Queen as this covert action hero.
Mm-hmm.
And she has the action hero mentality. I mean, after she reveals herself as Queen Elizabeth X, She's this very attractive, dynamic looking lady with the Red Riding Hood cape and everything, and the mask and the blasters, and she's this action hero, secret action hero monarch.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'm the bloody queen. Basically, I rule. And I liked the basically I rule line, but the rest of it is just a little over the top for me.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's more fairy tale than realism, because any monarch, even in this circumstance, would be surrounded by courtiers and various servants and that sort of thing. You would never have this ability to go out alone like that.
Only in a Shakespeare play.
Right. Maybe that's what this is. So they go back to her quarters, and they discuss how she's 50, and Amy is surprised that she looks so young. That she's been investigating this weird circumstance for a decade, for 10 years, and the doctor figures it all out in an afternoon.
Also, in talking about the creature, because now we know there's this creature, there's this beast below from the title underneath Starship UK, and it's got those tentacle stinger thingies that are growing up into the ship, and Queen Elizabeth suggests that it's like an infestation, and her subjects are being fed to it by members of her own administration. So, unfortunately, this actually goes by a little quicker than it should. They should have a little more dwelling on that, about my government is collaborating with an alien invasion. We have this creature invading us, or set of creatures invading us, and my ministers are feeding my own subjects to it.
Right.
So we have alien collaboration in the midst of an invasion going on. They should have given us a little bit more of that, because what that does is it's misdirection from what's really going on. And it's good misdirection. It just goes by too fast.
That's true. So in the quarters, the doctor is kind of... He's a little suspicious of the mask, and that also goes by kind of fast, but it's fine, because we'll come back to it. He'll bring it up again. Yep. But the Winders show up in her quarters, and they reveal that they're half human, half Smiler, which is really weird. And they say that she's to come with them to the Tower of London, on the highest authority. She says, "I am the highest authority." That's right, Mum.
Yeah.
In other words, on her authority, she's ordered it.
Well, there is a dodge, although they don't go into it. It could be like a previous monarch, or there's an authority higher than you that you just don't know about.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Also, for the American audience, going to the Tower they say it like it's a bad thing. And to an American audience,
it was.
We're not that familiar with what the Tower was. But the Tower of London was, at various points in its history, a prison where they would keep people they were waiting to execute.
Yeah, Catholics may be familiar with St. Thomas More's last trip to the Tower.
There, yeah.
And of course, the irony of this one is the Tower of London is actually the bottom level of the ship.
Right, the dungeon, essentially. So in the Tower's dungeon, they're told that protesters, those who push the protest button, and those of no value to society, so not just people who are going to reveal things, but people who are deemed of no value, they're fed to the beast. I mean, they're pretty cold here. But for some reason, it won't eat children, even though they keep sending children to it. But the children apparently turned into some kind of slave labor. And we see Timmy here in this scene.
Yeah, and it's interesting that it won't eat children, because it has a kind of... That itself has a kind of fairy tale vibe, but it's a modern fairy tale. This is a fairy tale for 21st century BBC where you can't hurt children. This is not real old school fairy tale. Where Hansel and Gretel are in mortal danger.
Exactly.
There is no problem about killing children. In fact, there are lots of fairy tales that are cautionary tales where children die.
Which was kind of the point of fairy tales. To don't do these bad things because you could die. Yes, that's true.
Yeah, don't wander off into the forest, or you might meet the witch that'll eat you, cook you in a pie and eat you.
Or the big bad wolf, or all the kinds of things. So meanwhile, the doctor does the big reveal. This is the standard moment where the doctor reveals that the creature, the whale, is the engine for Starship UK, and it's being kept in line through constant torture. This electrical shock being sent right into the pain centers of its brain, and that's what's motivating it to keep going.
And they reveal this at the 30-minute mark, We still have
Yeah.
13 minutes left to go. So this is the big reveal at the 2/3 mark. And that seems a little misproportioned to me. Normally, you'd have the big reveal a little later in the episode and not so much, post-climax or conceptual climax. And I think that some of the criticisms I've seen of this, and that even I've made myself, is it seems a little rushed.
Yeah.
And if they had moved the reveal later, it would have given them time to unpack a few things a little better in leading up to this.
Well, and what it allowed for was the doctor's rant against all
Yes.
humans. No one who is human can speak now,
Right.
wrongfully, it turns out. But it allowed to kind of the aggressive side of the Matt Smith doctor to come out, and I wonder if that was the conscious choice, was to show that he's not the bubbly, bounce around clown, but there is still that aggressive, angry side to him, and that's how they chose to show that.
Yeah, I agree. I think Moffat really wanted the whole idea of the episode was to get us to this scene where we can really bring out the new Doctor's new personality quirks, the various aspects of it early, this very first episode. So I agree with you, Jimmy. I think they should have spent more time unpacking some of the other stuff. But I think that's why they did it this way. So I'm not sure it was better to do it that way. But it was
also,
weird.
we had a reveal of the Doctor's teeth, so to speak, in the previous episode, where after defeating the Atraxi early, he calls him back to give him a tongue lashing.
Right, that's true. So the Doctor tells Liz she's not 50, she's more like 300, and it turns out that she's behind all of it. She was there when the ship launched. She was the monarch at the beginning. A video that she made for herself plays, and she's got a voting console too, except this doesn't say protest and forget. It says abdicate and forget. And so her video reveals to her that she had the impossible choice. The world was being destroyed. They couldn't get their ship launched like all the other nations did. And while the children were crying in the streets for fear of dying from the solar flares, suddenly this space whale showed up, and it's the last of its kind.
Because of course it is. It's a fairy tale.
Yes, they always are the last of their kind. And so they trapped it and made it into the engine of their ship for some reason. And she has this choice where we can free the star whale, which would doom the people. I'm not sure why.
Because, she explains to herself that if she hits abdicate, she will lose her authority, and the space whale will be free, and the ship will break apart.
Right.
So apparently the ship is physically dependent on the whale for its integrity. It's like, now they could have unpacked this a little more, but apparently it's not just that they would be adrift without the whale. They would physically break up.
Okay. And then the alternative would be to continue to torture the whale in order to save the people. But then you have to have this police state and this neurosis at the heart of the society about we have to pretend we aren't living by torturing another creature. And so that's the choice. And the Doctor says, well, first the Doctor takes Amy to task. You chose to take it upon yourself to save me from my choice of what to do here. And he's so angry at this that he said, that's it, you're done, I'm taking you home after this.
Yeah, we should unpack a little more here, because what happens is Liz 10 watches the video, she is torn. Amy is, in getting to know the Doctor, especially in this episode, has learned, as a Time Lord, he's the last of his kind. He's very old, he's very kind, and he can't stand it when children are crying. And so he'll intervene. He'll break his one rule of never intervene when children are crying. At least that's the way she articulated it earlier in the episode. And she starts thinking about the space whale. It's like, okay, it's very old. It's the last of its kind. It showed up when Earth was about to burn and children were crying. It can't stand children crying either. It intervened. It didn't get captured. It showing up during the solar flares was not a miracle. It was volunteering to help. And they didn't understand, and they've been torturing it ever since. And so what we need to do is stop the torture. And this all goes by, and we get this presented to us kind of in backwards fashion. But what we see on screen is she grabs Liz Tin's hand and says, "I'm sorry, I need your hand for a second," and slaps the abdicate button. And there's a great convulsion as if Starship UK is about to break apart, and then it all settles down.
Yeah.
And the head winder guy is like, "I don't understand what happened. And why is it so smooth now? We're actually moving faster towards our destination, wherever that is." And Amy says, "Well, you stop torturing the pilot. Kind of helps."
Right.
We should also mention that the doctor was in the process of basically turning the whale into brain dead.
Yes.
He was going to, basically wipe the whale's brains out, basically, shock him to death almost, so that then the brain would just mindlessly float where they want him to go.
Yeah.
He thought they had three choices. Let the whale stay in agony, kill everyone on the ship, or murder the whale, basically lobotomize it as painlessly as it can, and then I won't be the doctor anymore.
And notice how he says, "I'll have to find a new name because I won't be the doctor anymore," which is an unintentional foreshadowing of the war doctor.
Yep.
Right.
Also, this is why the doctor was going to put Amy off the TARDIS, in essence, because he says, "Look, you chose to try to manipulate me by forgetting and then sending yourself the message to don't let me investigate because you knew I would be put in this impossible situation where I'd have to make a horrible choice like this. And you took that on yourself, and don't ever do that." And she's like, "I made a mistake. I don't even remember it." And he has the great line, "But you did it, and that's what counts."
Right.
Because that's what does count. And then she redeems herself by putting all of this together so the doctor doesn't have to lobotomize the whale. And so this is a great illustration of a principle where two protagonists, neither one of the protagonists can solve the problem by themselves. They pull each other over the goal line.
Right.
Kind of like Ender and Bean do at the end of Ender's Shadow.
Right.
And this is another instance of that dynamic of they're both helping, cooperating, they're resisting each other, but they end up pulling each other over the goal line. And I love it when that happens. It's more satisfying dramatically than the wizard waltzes in and snaps his fingers and everything is done.
Right. And it is an interesting solution because Amy is integral to the solution. It's not just the companion as tag-along, as has often been the case.
And it also puts the doctor actually chasing the wrong track, where, he isn't the all-knowing expert that's going to snap his fingers and fix everything. He actually is going the wrong way, but he doesn't realize it at the time. He's thinking that, well, he's so caught up in how mad he is at Amy and how everything's going on, and he has to fix it. And it's like, no, you don't have to fix it. Here's the solution, and it's right in front of us.
And it's interesting they don't spot other potential solutions. Like, either the space whale is sentient or it's not. If it's not sentient, well, maybe you don't need to shock its pain center as much as you're doing. But if it's not sentient, these are essentially spurs.
Right.
If it's not sentient, you shouldn't, in principle, I mean, you want to say, let's only use as much as we need to, pain compliance, but basically it's spurs. And if you don't have a problem riding a horse, you shouldn't have a problem giving the space whale a little kick to say, giddy up. If it is sentient, negotiate.
Talk to it. Right.
We're sorry for the last 300 years we've been torturing you. Can you help us now again?
Right. So as we end things up, the Doctor and Amy have a moment where they talk about, how he is, as you mentioned, Jimmy, that he is like the whale, very old, alone, and has to run to help children in need.
By the way, notice the fairy tale theme of this, of the rescue back in the 29th century. The last of a dying race, the last space whale comes to rescue the crying children of Earth. I mean, how fairy tale is that?
Yes. So as they get back to the TARDIS, and they're having this, he's changed his mind. She's going to continue with him, and he says, "Never mind, never mind them. Big day tomorrow." And Amy's like, "What? You know about the wedding?" She's kind of thinking he knows about the wedding. He goes, "Well, it's always a big day tomorrow. We got a time machine. I skipped the little ones," which is great.
She has a question at this point. Have you ever just wanted to run away because you were scared or just because you could or
you
not
weren't ready for it.
or yeah, because she's clearly talking about the wedding. But we have this is a great character moment because as she's getting hinky about her wedding and just because you could, because there's this whole other life she could have.
Right.
Have you ever run away, Doctor? And he says, once, a long time ago. And he's clearly referring to when he first left Gallifrey.
Yep.
And
Yes.
there's this great moment of this parallel between the two of them as runaways. And I really like that.
Yeah.
Well, I like too where she asks, "Well, what happened?" And he just goes, "Hello."
Yeah.
What happened? It's going on right now.
And just as she's about to tell him about the wedding, she hears the phone ringing in the TARDIS, and so they go in and answer. He asks her to answer the phone for him, and there's this whole like back and forth. There's a little funny repartee. Who is it? It's the Prime Minister. and then he says, "Which Prime Minister?" "The British one." "Which British one?" Because of course he's known a lot of them. "It's Winston Churchill for you." "Oh." And Churchill's on the phone, and he says he wants the doctor to come. It's it's obviously World War II, and we see a shadow of a Dalek on the wall of his office. It's a tricky situation, Doctor, potentially very dangerous. And this is a setup for the next episode, Victory of the Daleks, I think it is.
Yeah. And then our final shot is watching Starship UK sail off, only now we get to see it from the underside, and we can see the space whale. So there was a 50-50 shot, depending on whether Amy and the doctor landed the TARDIS above or below the starship, that they would have known from the beginning there was a space whale here.
Right.
And as it goes by, we see a crack in time appear on the surface of the starship.
Right. The infamous crack that will be the series arc for this season.
Yep.
And that's where we end it. So any final notes on this, Father Cory? Anything left to say?
I kind of say it's kind of almost funny to go back to Matt Smith after David Tennant after so long with David Tennant. It's kind of funny to go back to see the Matt Smith, and it is almost like when Matt Smith first took over as the Doctor. This new character, this new Doctor. Almost that same kind of feeling. So.
Yeah, Jimmy,
I liked it more than I thought. I mean, I've always a lot of fans kind of don't like this episode. And I've always liked it more, and watching it this time, I appreciated it even more, I thought. It reminded me why I liked it. I don't like everything about it. There's things that I just find very implausible. There are some logic problems with it, and there are things that definitely could be fixed if they had let it breathe a little more.
Right.
But overall, I mean, there's some really complex psychological things going on in here that I find very intriguing with the politics and Amy's character development and the relationship with the doctor. And once you accept that this is a fairy tale, it really works in a way that it wouldn't otherwise.
Yeah, I agree. All right, so let's wrap things up there. We'll take a moment to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create Secrets of Doctor Who, including Greg M., Julia W., Nancy M., Karen M., and Isaac K. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue the Secrets of Doctor Who and all the shows at StarQuest. You can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. We'd also like to thank Victor Lambs, who edits the show for us every week. And so that's it from us. What did you think of The Beast Below? How do you feel? Is it one you liked, or are you among those who dislike it? Let us know by commenting on the show at sqpn.com or at the Secrets of Doctor Who Facebook page, or you can send us an email to drwho@sqpn.com. And we'll be back next time when we'll be discussing the third Doctor story, The Mind of Evil. Until then, Father Cory Sticha, thank you for joining me and sharing the Secrets of Doctor Who.
Thank you, Dom.
Jimmy Akin, thank you as well.
Thanks, Dom.
Once again, I'm Dom Bettinelli. Thank you for listening to the Secrets of Doctor Who on StarQuest. And remember, all that pain and misery and loneliness, and it just made it kind.
Right. This is going to be fun.